Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining today's session of the Connect University Autumn School. Today we will talk about disinformation. First, before going to the substance, a few housekeeping rules. If you have questions, please join the Slido using the hashtag disinformation. If you want to share any insight on social media, please use the hashtag Connect University. This session will be recorded and will be available in the Digital EU YouTube channel and Futurium. Links will be added in the chat. If you are interested, join us tomorrow on the Connect University sessions in the morning for the Digital Services Act and in the afternoon for the Digital Services Market Act. Let's dive into the substance now. So, why we're having a session on disinformation. The European Commission has started to deal with this issue several years ago, and I believe it's under the eyes of everybody the importance to tackle this phenomenon. And it's not only a perception that we have here in the institution, but it's overall a problem that European citizens feel important to address. In fact, we have, according to recent Eurobarometer surveys, we have 26% of the European citizens that consider the fight to disinformation and illegal content a priority for the future. Over a quarter of Europeans, 28%, think that in the past 7 days they have very often been exposed to disinformation and fake news. 81% of European questioned believe that the existence of disinformation that misrepresent reality or is even false is a problem for democracy in general. So it's a paramount of importance to develop a policy that address these societal issues. And of course, disinformation is not a new phenomenon. We have to be clear on that. But of course, in the digital age, it has taken an unprecedented dimension and has a lot of implication. It spreads rapidly through social media platform, website, chat, all the means that we are using on an everyday basis. So, the problem of disinformation is it is often designed to deceive, mislead, or manipulate, and they can have far-reaching consequences. First and foremost, disinformation undermines the very foundation of democracy. In democratic societies, informed citizens are the bedrock of accountable governance. Disinformation disrupts this foundation by distorting the truth, manipulating perceptions, and sowing division. So it's important that we address the phenomenon to protect our democratic system. It's also important to protect public health. And we have seen during the pandemic how much dangerous can be disinformation on health-related issues. We have seen how vaccine hesitancy, spread of unproven treatments, and general mistrust in healthcare authorities have impacted the behavior of citizens. It's therefore important to develop a strategy that, however, has to take into account a crucial point, which is the protection of the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is a fundamental human right, which needs to be protected in the action that we take to fight disinformation. Therefore, today we will going to see how the European Commission have developed a strategy to tackle disinformation, but we will start from the evidence that we have about the phenomenon of online disinformation. And for this, we have today with us two, let me share a slide with you. Two important speakers. We have with us Carlos Hernandez Echeverria, which is Assistant Director and Head of Public Policy and Institutional Development of Maldita in Spain. Maldita is a fact-checking organization. And Jens Lingen, which is a disinformation team leader in the Joint Research Center. I will conclude this presentation by giving you a presentation of what the European Commission has done so far to tackle the phenomenon. Without further ado, I will pass the floor to Carlos. Carlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks to the Connect University for the invitation. As Alberto was saying, I work for a fact-checking organization that is called Maldita.es, and I also do public policy for the European Association of Fact-Checking Organizations, which is called EFCSN. And I start there because I think it's important to know when talking about fact-checking and disinformation, what is that we do as fact-checkers and what we actually don't. And very particularly, I think most of the people would say that fact checkers are in the business of rating claims. Like we receive some kind of assurance or claim that is out there, and we say whether it's false or not. This was the primitive stage of fact checking. Fact checking organizations do much more nowadays. I'm going to start by speaking about the one that I know best. This is Maldita. Well, this is a little outdated. We are more people now. I am not there in the picture because I was, as happens often, in Brussels doing something against disinformation that is not that people not normally connect to fact checking, which is public policy work and thinking about regulation and all that. But this is my team. What are we? We are a nonprofit that fights disinformation. Certainly, we do fact checking, but we do many other things. And it's been since we were born in 2017. It's been a struggle and a growth to find out the many other different ways we could be fighting disinformation beyond fact checking. So. Yes, we are a nonprofit that fights disinformation, and we do a lot of things. We monitor information, we do fact-checking. Of course, we run media literacy programs. We have rapid alert systems for disinformation. We design our own technology through AI tools. We collaborate with research. We do public policy, chatbots, data journalism. We do, TikTok explainers. Luckily, it's me doing them. But the thing is that we have learned that disinformation, it is a very massive problem, and luckily we are not now in the phase of having to explain that disinformation is a big problem, as Alberto was saying. But we are probably in the next phase, which is how we define what it needs to be done. And our own approach for that is that we need to be doing a lot of different things at the same time. I will talk more about this, but let's say that on a given day, Maldita is doing many different things. Like, of course, we have a team of 25, 30 people that today in particular, they are focusing on Hamas and Israel disinformation that have debunked 30 different hoaxes and are identifying narratives about the war and what is happening there. And they have published, I think it was this morning, 32 articles in 2 days, just debunking and providing explainers on that. That is part of what we do. But on any given day, we are doing TikTok, as my colleague can be seen there, to explain difficult concepts and disinformation to a young audience that might not follow us on our traditional channels or might not follow media in general. And on the same day, we might be driving around Spain with this wonderful bus, just talking to people in small towns and letting them know why this information is affecting them and why this information is not only about politics or it's not only about the economy, but it can be about trying to scam you, phishing. So let's say that over the years, Maldita, but I think many other fact checkers, we have realized that disinformation is much wider problem that requires us to do many different things beyond just assessing claims. One thing we wanted to be sure to do was to have a real feeling for this information. What happens with fact checkers? I would say like our our most competitive advantage, if you want to say it like that, is that we deal with this information in the basic nature that users find it online. Like, we are not talking about abstractions. We are not making our judgments on, by reading the papers. We are actually seeing the hoaxes that people are consuming, mainly in the case of Spain, where over 90% of the population is on WhatsApp, is where we are focusing more. We have been convincing people for years, with some luck and some degree of success, to do something, which is that when they found something that they think that it might be a hoax, it might be disinformation, something that arouses their suspicions, that they sent us through WhatsApp. Why WhatsApp? Because, as I was saying, WhatsApp is everywhere in Spain. So this information there is very challenging, because obviously it's private messaging, and we all want private messaging to be private. So our only way to know what people were actually consuming in terms of this information was to ask them to open a little window into their WhatsApps by forwarding the things that they felt were disinformation to our WhatsApp number. Obviously, we started doing this manually, but then, the pandemic came, and we were receiving maybe 3,000 messages a day, and that was impossible to cope with. I mean, we could have hired double the team, and it was still impossible. So we developed our own chatbot that is connected to our database, and the whole purpose of this, it was to provide, the system is using AI so that it can recognize that whatever you are asking for in your voice note, in a meme that you are resending and forwarding for us, or even a natural language question that you sent us on WhatsApp, like, is it true that the president said this or that? The objective is that this system, in a matter of seconds, will get you an answer that can be, two different things. One of them might be, oh, I think that you are asking about this, and we have already produced an article about this. Here's the link. Please share. And there's the other way around, which is probably the most interesting thing, is when the chatbot tells you, okay, Alberto, I know nothing about what you are saying about this content you just sent to me, or this WhatsApp chain, or this whatever, but I'm going to tell my human colleagues to go and investigate it. And this is a wonderful way for us to know what's trending on private messaging in Spain. And our experience is that this information is not only normally starts on private messaging, which is normally the case, it is much more effective and credible on private messaging, because you are receiving this information from sources that you generally think are trustworthy, like your family, your friends from football, your high school band. This is the people that you are in contact with through WhatsApp. So this was a bit to say that fact checkers have this ability to deal with this information, not in abstract terms, but to actually see whatever the users are consuming, investigate it, and tell them sometimes, okay, this turned out to be false. What this is important, I think, particularly for if you are working for a European institution or another kind of government entity, many even private institutions, this information is often framed as a geopolitical effort of propaganda or delegitimation of this that regime or democracies or the work of autocracies, all that. And that is certainly true. And we are subject to this kind of interference by rogue actors, and we are subject to propaganda. That is all true, but that is only part of the problem. And let me tell you something about this, about why we shouldn't see this as just a foreign concern for us, as something that comes from outside the European Union. Because the really good disinformation can be can be disseminated, can be powered, can be amplified for some rogue forces outside of the European Union that doesn't have our well-being in their intentions. But even those actors know that they should care about narratives more. So, just to provide you with an example, the most effective disinformation, is normally at the local level, at the national level, that connects with what you are seeing and the kind of ideas and perceptions you have of your own realities. So normally the most effective disinformation campaigns we see might be amplified by rogue actors, but they are not always like started from scratch in somewhere in the foreign ministry of a rogue power, because normally what those powers are interested in is in fomenting narratives that are general discourses that go beyond a particular hoax or even a particular disinformation campaigns. We will see more about that. So there are a couple of ways to look at it. I like, and fact checkers normally focus on narratives, on the general discourse that someone is pushing about, say, the European Union or your institution or democracy or that. And then there's another way to look at it that is important as well, that is about tactics, like the famous TTPs and coordinated, unauthentic behavior and farms of bots and whole networks that seem to amplify content that is disinformation. So it's really a combination of both things. Like most effective disinformation campaigns would rely on general narratives that are beneficial for their own discourse, and they will try to push that through particular tactics and coordinated behavior. What is the problem with focusing sometimes on narratives is that attribution is hard, but attribution in the real world is very hard too. It is very often the case that you cannot pinpoint the particular disinformation campaign on a given state actor, say, if it's not from the tactical side. That is to be able to connect that to a farm bot in St. Petersburg, for example. While narratives are much more effective, those general discourses about, I don't know, the West is bad, European democracy is not real, all those narratives are harder to attribute to some actors because it is hard and sometimes it's frankly impossible to differentiate disinformation from misinformation, to differentiate those who are pushing an agenda from those who are just the first victims of a disinformation campaign, and out of their good heart, they think they're sharing something real. So in the end, I think fact checkers and most people focusing on disinformation work and anti-disinformation efforts, even in regulation, have chosen to focus on harm and find ways to detect harmful disinformation and to provide solutions for it. So when I speak about solutions, let's say these campaigns that this is from the last Spanish election. The first picture is an allegation that certain political leaders of the center right were cozying up to drug dealers, and the second one is a hoax that became very popular on election day, that the left government currently in power was provoking kind of a train, a blocking in the train traffic between two cities so people wouldn't be able to vote. This kind of disinformation that is well placed in a campaign, it's amplified by actors that wish to push a narrative that it's much wider than that hoax itself. It's a narrative that says that the political class is by itself corrupt and it doesn't have your own interests in mind, and democracy doesn't matter, and that your voice, that the vote doesn't matter, that the whole democracy idea is a hoax. The general narrative is constant, and the particular hoaxes are sometimes organic and created in the particular country or member state, just amplified by actors that seem to see this kind of contents and disinformation contents as things that might advance their general narratives about a given institution or member state or even philosophical view of Europe or any other instance. What I mean is that the general narratives, the wide view of how many disinformation campaigns can be framed are about corruption, democracy being fake or ineffective, the general moral decay of Europe or the West, or all that. And for these sometimes international actors, it's easier to find the contents or the hoaxes that are locally produced, and they can amplify them in many ways, and finding ways to put them into mainstream media and some other ways. They could do that rather to invent and plant a campaign from scratch, which is much more difficult and it requires much more skill. So in the end, when we talk about solutions for this kind of problem, there is this concept of what is going to be the silver bullet.
I think we have lost Carlos. Carlos, are you back?
I am here.
Okay, very good. Continue.
I didn't even notice, sorry.
Continue.
Yeah, I was going to say about solutions to this information. If you do a quick Google search of the last few years, you will find many headlines that is this thing going to solve this information? So is media literacy going to solve this information? Is AI going to solve this information? Nothing is going to solve this information per se. But however, to mitigate the harms that are very real and that are costing lives and livelihoods in disinformation campaigns, we need to have a coordinated effort of many different actions that are going to help. So I could dispense with the fact of this thing alone will save us. And I think it's good to see that from the early days of regulation about disinformation and the political actors taking an interest on this, I think it's good that we are more and more often at a point where the regulators understand that this is a very complex thing that requires many different efforts, many different actors, and that we should always doubt these people that the first sentence they utter about this information is, oh no, this I could solve this real quick. There is no such a thing as real quick for this kind of problem. So about solutions, what the fact checkers advocate for generally. So we find ourselves, because sometimes we work with some platforms and some social media, we often find ourselves being accused of censorship, which is awful, particularly because most of us come from the side of journalism in origin. And let me tell you that is the single most successful piece of disinformation going on about fact checking that I really detest, because I have found very few people in fact checking that want to focus on removals of content and that want to remove content from platforms. On the contrary, I mean, we all understand that there are things that are completely unacceptable online or offline. Like if you are on social media or you find, crude cases of violence, child pornography, all those things, of course, they have to be deleted and they are illicit and they need to be removed. But what fact checkers we normally work for and the content we are normally around is more like harmful content, is things that are not necessarily illegal, but they could benefit from context. So fact checkers are always on a mission to provide context for people to see that, okay, this video that you are consumed and you have been sent saying that this is Gaza today. This was actually Libya 2 years ago. And that might alter your complete perception of a conflict or something. So when we work with platforms and what we push platforms to do, for example, as in our participation of any kind of regulatory processes or the code of practice on disinformation, is actually pushing platforms to provide more information. What do we tell YouTube or what do we tell TikTok? When you find something that is false, it's very often the case that it's more effective to put a label there or to put a link or put any kind of visual cue that tells users, hey, this video you are about to see or this video you have just seen is false for these reasons. And we find ourselves very sometimes in front of very big digital services that what they want to do is delete. And we think that when the user goes through a link and find a dead link of something they want to access and they cannot, and there is not even an explanation, they're saying this video has been deleted because it portrayed, I don't know, racial violence against a minority. There is no explanation and there is no content at the end of the link. That is a problem, and that creates distrust. So normally what fact checkers would advocate is this kind of information. Okay, there is something that is really viral, that it is harmful and that it is false. Say, you know, a video, as we have seen very often, saying, drop chemotherapy, eat more almonds, and it has 1 million views. This is the kind of intervention, the one that you are seeing on your screen right now, that we advocate. You know, something there that tells you some independent source, in this case, a fact checker, said this is false. And if you click see why, you can actually see why. You can actually see the evidence. So this is our model is generally the model of providing more information. So when this is framed as an issue of free speech, and it is sometimes, this is what we want. We want free speech plus. We want more information rather than less information. And we want platforms who have a lot of power to exercise their freedom of speech, but also their social responsibility in telling, you know, in maybe just putting a banner there that says, okay, this guy might have a lot of followers when he says the earth is flat. We have pictures from the European Space Agency that prove otherwise. And I don't think that's much to ask from platforms. And now that we are talking about platforms, obviously, and I will finish soon, there is, I think the European Union is in a unique position and has realized that some time ago to intervene in this reality, which is that the public opinion is being mostly debated and generated in online spaces that are by nature private spaces, in the sense that are owned by social media companies. Most of the time they are not European, but they are theoretically private, but the public implications of their behavior and rules are very huge. So I guess you are all familiar with the Digital Services Act and the fact that the co-legislators in Europe decided that larger digital services that have more than 45 million users per month, they needed to have extra responsibilities, and they needed to prove that they have effective risk mitigation measures against things like disinformation. I think that is a wonderful idea. The problem we have found often is that harmful content, it's difficult to set in very clear terms what is a sufficient, realistic, an effective risk mitigation effort against disinformation in these massive online spaces. So that's when the code of practice of disinformation of 2022 that Alberto, I think, is gonna be speaking to in a few minutes comes, in order to provide very much needed clarity and specificity to the kind of actions these platforms can take against disinformation. Actions that are not out of the world, and that they need to be, we know some of them are efficient against disinformation, against the dissemination of disinformation, and yet sometimes because they go against the bottom line of some of these companies that are not taking. A final word about fact-checking that is obviously advocated in the Code of Practice as an effective measure against disinformation, and it's the Code of Practice promotes the fact-checking coverage of the European Union, the integration of use of fact-checking, and for fact-checkers to have access to the information they need to continue fact-checking. Why, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, why fact-checkers are to be trusted on this? This is something that we would never ask you to take a leap of faith with us. There is, since last year, there is an association of European fact-checking organization, the EFCSN. As you can see, it was put into motion by more than 40 fact-checking organizations all over Europe. And the idea was to have very strong standards that could make you trust us when you ask the question why I should trust what a fact checker has to say about something. There are things there that prevent us from being partisan. We have limits on the kind of staff that we can hire, the kind of agreements we can have with political parties. We can have no agreements with political parties. We have restrictions on our funding. We have a clear methodology on how do we select the claims we investigate, so we can make sure that there cannot be a so-called fact checker that only fact check one party or one side of the political spectrum, or why that. We have a strong code of ethics, minimize harms, protect privacy, have this kind of super harmful, super, I would say, hurtful corrections when we messed up. This is a correction by Maldita. It has a big thing there saying correction, and we publish in the same URL that the original mistake was made in, and we publish in every social media. So when we fail, we all make a mistake, it hurts, and it allows us to be more, to be better in the future. But probably this is the most stringent part of our EFCSN code for fact checkers, where do we make sure we weed out bad actors. We publicly disclose any income source over 5% of our income. I don't think you have seen this anywhere, not in the media sector, really in any sector. We disclose any money we get from digital platforms, public institutions, or anything that we consider conflict of interest as per our board. And then our assessors get every single source of income of our organization that goes over 1%. Which one are the assessors? This is the last thing I say. Well, to be a fact checker in Europe, to be part of the EFCSN, you have to go through an evaluation of 2 different academic independent evaluators that are normally university professors that can go through all your content and all your financial information and find if you are actually complying with the code of standards for European organizations. We have claim procedures to make sure that if we ever let in a rogue actor, someone who is not acting up to the standards of fact-checking, that the board of the EFCSN can actually know about them, and we have a sanctions procedure to weed out bad actors. So this is something that we have done really to reclaim the public trust in a time where trust is very hard to obtain, and also to have a common voice, that we can have our house in order, so we can have a common voice, for example, in these conversations about public policy. So we have actually the EFCSN, the Association of European Fact Checkers, have legitimacy to go there and say, this is what we think about this information. To do that, we needed to have our own house in order and make sure we have the highest standards that there is for fact checkers in order for the people to trust us and for other actors to trust us. So, final word. Fact checking. Why is fact checking important? Because every other thing starts with fact checking. When someone wants to make an experiment and train an AI to identify this information, that that language model is normally trained on fact checking, because there is a human in the end saying this is true or this is not, and this is the evidence. All research on disinformation generally uses fact-checking as a measure to see what is true and what is false. So without the, thousands of people in fact-checking organizations all over Europe working every day to debunk hoaxes, many of the other things, the design of media literacy curriculums, many other anti-disinformation efforts are impossible to do, because in the end, as we are learning through AI, the human factor and the fact that it's someone with public and clear evidence debunking things is what normally sustains many other anti-disinformation actions. So this is it. I think I have gone a bit over my time. I am happy to respond questions. This is my email if if some other thing comes to mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. We have a few minutes for a few questions. I don't know if you see the question. If you don't, I will do the job of a good moderator, and I will pick up few of them. I think you have sort of addressed already this. There is, of course, an important question that was asked regarding how you ensure your independence, where your funding comes from. I mean, of course, you can answer formal data, but I think you can answer in general for the fact-checking community that also is behind the network that you have just presented.
When we made this question was very pressing for us. Like, yeah, okay, we are here. Many of us come from the media sector, which doesn't get a lot of trust and confidence these days. How do we show independence? And this is the way we settle to do this, through transparency. But we needed, it wasn't really about general idea of transparency. We needed to be very thoughtful and be ready to go much beyond what other actors are there. So really, we are publicizing in our websites. Every EFCSM member has any source of income over 5% of the income, which is very low. I don't think, I have never seen something that is as detailed as that, like company by company, nature of the agreement, what is the service, why we are getting the money. And I think that was our honest approach to be independent. But there was also the methodological aspect to allow people to understand why we decide to investigate something, because we might have some biases in the end that put us in this or that direction. We wanted also to have a public methodology. For example, Maldita is for sure published there, when we explain why we investigate this today. And it's normally about whether a claim it's viral and whether a claim it's dangerous, and it's a combination of them both, really. So that's how we intend to show people that we are independent. And for people to, at the very least, say, okay, you are fact-checking this company, but I checked against your numbers and this company is providing you with so much of your income. That is useful information. Even if we weren't able to tell them, to convince you, at least we would put into your hands every single transparency tool you have to understand the whole context about us, which is what we want to do. And then what we wanted before anything else is for this not to become kind of a code of ethics that that you subscribe and forget about it. That's why we go through this assessment by independent evaluators every 2 years, and they look at it and they see. And there is complaint procedures, so the assessors can know whether someone is pointing to us as being non-compliant with our standards in this particular case. So for us, it was very important. There is no perfect way, I guess, but this is our honest way to try and compete for the trust. I am seeing now that the second question is basically means that the fact checker, in this case Meta, also has access to what people report to you as fact checker. This is an interesting question. We are part of Meta's third-party fact-checking program, for example, and many other fact checkers are in Europe as well. a key part, and I think the foundation of that agreement, is that Meta cannot tell you, like contractually cannot tell you what to fact check and what not. This is actually what you do. And you do your investigation, and if you are satisfied with the results, you publish an article, and then if you publish an article, Meta can use it in the third-party fact-checking program and start showing labels or not. But I think it's important that fact-checking organizations remain independent to decide by their own methodology what they investigate and what they not. But I think if the question was about if how this relationship with Meta goes, that is the way to go. The fact that they cannot tell us, fact check this in particular, that would make me very uneasy. I see another question. Please, Alberto, feel free to interrupt me if I go over my time. But
go for an additional question, and then we pass the ball to Jens.
Okay. The next one is, what would make your work easier as a fact checker? Well, I think the major platforms now, as you are probably aware, X, former Twitter, has left the code of practice on disinformation, so they are a different thing. But the rest of the platforms that are still committed, at least on paper, to the code of practice on disinformation of the European Union, they have taken very clear commitments to empower users, showing them fact checkers. That allow their users to see fact checking and to make their own decisions. What it would make my job much easier and much more impactful is for those large platforms that have a lot of responsibility in the current state of things to do what they said that they would do and to act on that. And from the side of the institutions, my letter to Santa Claus here, and my really would make my job easier, is to make sure that there is enforcement of DSA, that there is a serious effort behind the code of practice on disinformation, and that there is an actual, that the institutions make sure that those companies accept their responsibilities and act upon them. That would make my job easier, and I think that would make disinformation, that it would provide people with more tools to be more protected against disinformation. Yeah,
I would stop you here, Carlos. Maybe at the end we will have time to address other questions. We'll see. But thank you very much for your presentation. It was important, I think, to show the role of fact checkers in this debate, and because, as you said, also in order to build a proper policy, we need to have evidence of what's happening on these online platforms, and that's why your work is essential, because everything starts from there. I would then pass the floor to Jens, that will give us a little bit the point of view of what researchers do to understand the phenomenon of disinformation. So, Jens, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to present today. My name is Jens Linge. I work at the European Commission in the Joint Research Center, more precisely in Unit T5, Text and Data Mining. Today, I'm going to talk about the analysis of disinformation narratives. Just a quick overview. I'm leading a small team that employs a data-driven approach to study disinformation, and we do that for various policy areas, contributing to the production of weekly reports and carrying out also our own research and development on disinformation. Our main topics of interest right now are public health. We have studied COVID-19 for the last 3 years and 10 months, really. We are looking into vaccine hesitancy. We are studying disinformation on climate change and geopolitical events such as the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And we are now preparing ourselves for the upcoming European Parliament elections in 2024, and here we are also looking into election-related narratives, and we are also looking into migration, as this is quite an important topic for the upcoming elections. So our idea is that we want to go from monitoring to a response. So we might find disinformation on the internet. On the left, there's an example from a German website that we can machine translate. And we can also look for fact checks on these topics. So the German website ran an article claiming that in dairy products, meat and vegetables, you could find mRNA that serves as an oral vaccination. And actually, there are fact checkers who looked into this, and there's no evidence that COVID vaccines are in any form in the food supply. And all these data contribute to a larger communication effort. So in our weekly review, the response would have been to continue to highlight the safety and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines, and pointing out that overall the benefits of the authorized vaccines far outweigh the risks that are associated with rare side effects. And here we would point to the website of the European Medicines Agency, for example, and the Commission's website. We're giving the official information, but as I said, we can also provide to communication experts the fact checks. So you can also look at fact checks from Associated Press, for example, or from Maldita, as we've just heard. So the techniques that are then used by our colleagues in communications are pre-bunking and debunking, and there has been quite a lot of research already on the efficacy of pre-bunking and debunking. So the good news, it works, and it also works if it comes from the European Commission. For example, there's been a study by colleagues from JRC, Hendrik Bruns et al., to look into pre-bunking and debunking from the side of the Commission. So what are we doing exactly? So we focus on real-time monitoring. There's a publicly available portal called Europe Media Monitor that automatically retrieves roughly 400,000 news items a day in 80 languages. We also look into official websites. So for example, for public health, we look into Ministry of Health websites and public health agency websites. For social media, we are mostly looking at X, Twitter, via the Enterprise API and Telegram. So here we can follow hashtags such as COP28 for the upcoming COP meeting in November, December. We could follow users such as the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime or keywords. And we can also look into network analysis. And I will have a few slides on this later. Network analysis we apply to identify, for example, shared links or identify new sources. Then we have a list of roughly 460 sources that were indicated to us by fact-checking organizations as sites that frequently spread mis and disinformation. And we scrape these websites to get more content, to understand really what the disinformations are, and to identify new narratives and trending narratives. How do we do this? So we base most of our efforts on machine learning. And with machine learning, we are able to detect predefined narratives and label incoming articles accordingly. Here are two examples. New mRNA-based vaccine X was found to cause immediate death in healthy people. Such a sentence would be labeled by our algorithm as disinformation narrative, vaccination causes death. Similarly, a text stating that new measures in country Y only aim to restrict our freedoms would be labeled as disinformation narrative turned to authoritarianism. We do this basically on a daily basis, and we produce outputs on a daily, weekly basis. So we can use the labeled articles to detect trends, also detect long-term trends. I will have some examples on that. to also see whether they are country-specific trends. So you can imagine that there are narratives that only appear in one country, whereas other narratives, they kind of spread all over the EU, for example. And a new narrative might also spread over time, similar to a pandemic. You can also have an infodemic, so something starts and then spreads across language and country barriers. And all this provides further insight for briefing material. And as I've shown, we want to contribute to communication efforts eventually. This is a screenshot on COVID-19. I mean, with COVID-19, we are really busy. So this is the first time we saw news from China on COVID-19. So that was a screenshot with articles from the 31st of December 2019. Also, public health colleagues in Canada from the Global Public Health Intelligence Network picked it up already on 31st of December 2019. Then we quickly moved into this infodemic, where we had up to 228,000 articles a day mentioning COVID-19. So we started with clustering and identifying narratives that were circulating, structuring or ordering them in a list, basically with the three levels that we called super narratives, narratives, and sub-narratives. And we had to annotate a massive training set to be able to really achieve a high accuracy. So we trained, we annotated roughly 34,000 items and used that on a transformer model. So these are models that are now really commonly used and are accessible also from Google libraries and so on. And here, a few not so fun facts about COVID-19. So as I said, we started with 460 sources that were indicated to us by fact-checking organizations. We retrieved roughly 1.3 million COVID-19 text items that were automatically labeled. Our training set consisted of 34,000 manually annotated items, and at peak times, we had up to 10,000 items. In terms of CPU requirements, for those that are interested more in the techniques behind it, the weekly compute was not too high actually. So if you have a standard server, it's 1 hour of computation time. On a GPU server, it boils down to 6 minutes. So actually, that's quite doable for us. And this is now an overview of 3 years of COVID-19 disinformation. And I'm quite happy that we are going to publish this in the next weeks in +1. So there will be the results of our 3-year study publicly available. And there we give you more details really on the super narratives and how they develop. We also look into the country trends. So there's a lot of information in that article. So when I just want to pick out a few trends here. So when you look at the left side of the timeline, at the beginning of the pandemic, narratives that we labeled as fear-mongering were really predominant. There were many questions about the origin of the virus. What is interesting, in deep blue at the top, you can see that anti-vax narratives really became more prominent when we had the first vaccines really available. So it really became the predominant disinformation super narrative around November 2021. You can also see some geopolitical trends. So, for example, the Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine being pushed by Russian state media in June 2020. Claims that migrants bring COVID-19 to Europe. That was peaking in summer 2020, for example. At the bottom, there's another timeline where we show the overall development of disinformation on COVID-19, together with the red line, really that shows you how the disinformation on Ukraine started in January, February 2022. And what we noticed is that at the same time that there was more disinformation really on on Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the overall amount of COVID-19 disinformation decreased. If you want to read more about it, please check in +1, because our study is about to come out in the next few weeks. Now on a different topic, climate change. Here I show you a few of the narratives that we label. So in the first row, you can see, for example, conspiracy theories. The narrative would be blaming global elite, and the sub-narrative would be anti-Soros. This is quite common, and we find that quite frequently. I show you now 2 examples on another super narrative that is called a criticism of climate policies. The narrative is called impact on the economy, and the sub-narrative is climate policies are too costly. And we have looked into narratives that argue that the cost of implementing Fit for 55 will be enormous and will burden the population of EU member states. So this is really a Commission policy that is criticized here. We have other narratives arguing that CO2 savings will come at the cost of wide shutdowns in the German economy. That was an issue, especially in September, October 2022. And happy to announce also we are providing inputs to the COP28 by organizing a side event in Brussels, not in Dubai, Brussels, on the 1st of December this year. So that is what we did for the last COP meeting in Egypt last year, and we had a look at the super narratives just to see what is really the most predominant one. And the super narrative, climate policies are inefficient or flawed, was really the most the strongest, and it peaked around the time of COP27. So now I'm giving you some concrete examples. Here, the narrative is called unsustainable and ineffective. We saw that Austrian and German unverified sources questioned the environmental sustainability of wind turbines. They depict them as bird-killing devices. That was in the first article, reporting the findings of a study that allegedly demonstrated the impact on bird species, suffering a decline of at least 20% because of exposure to wind turbines. So we got 2 URLs pointing to this claim, but we also had a third URL with a fact check. And here the fact check actually showed that cats are really the #1 killer for birds, followed by building class, auto collisions, power line collisions, communication towers, oil pits, whereas wind turbines in this statistics are only at the bottom really of the list here. So they are the 7th here in this graph shown on the right. And if you work in communications and you are confronted with these claims, it is very useful really to get the information from fact-checking organizations to point to. And this is not a fact check that the European Commission carried out. It is done by independent experts. The second example concerns a narrative that is called climate cycles are natural. So here we found that Dutch unverified sources asserted that human CO2 emissions are not the main cause of environmental changes, pointing at cosmic phenomena such as magnetic fields. This is quite, we encounter quite frequently. And I mean, there are several fact checks. So we can really give you a list of fact-checking organizations that looked into it. And here the bottom line is that several independent lines of scientific evidence based on observational data sets and modeling indicate that current climate change is driven by human emissions of greenhouse gases, such as CO2. And again, what we are doing is we are looking at the content over time. So we can identify the URLs with these claims, but we can also identify the fact checks and pass it on to communication experts. For COP27, we also ran a little pilot project to look more into images and memes. So we looked into frequently shared memes around COP27. So here there is a meme or a comic that was published in the Daily Telegraph. And with our approach, we ran optical character recognition. So here the result will be private climate crisis, chat discussion, parking forum. You see the order of the words is not perfect, but it would help us already to understand the gist of the meme and really to further work with text that is embedded in memes. Now to a third topic. We have been looking into Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. We started actually before the invasion. So on the left side, you can see that in January, February 2022, we saw many narratives that we categorized as blaming others. And here I point to a few interesting trends. So I don't think I have to go through all of them, but a few interesting ones. So around the time of the Bucha massacre in early April 2022, we saw a lot of disinformation to discredit Ukraine. And we saw many Kremlin-financed sources pushing narratives to discredit Ukraine and the picture material, for example, the findings on the Bucha massacre. In September 2022, the negative consequences for the EU were really widely discussed, and there were many narratives really portraying the EU sanctions as equal to suicide. Yeah, so that was really a very clear peak in fall 2022. Then there are a few interesting ones as well. In March 2023, for example, just as the ICC arrest warrant against Russian President Putin came out, we saw a peak, a very clear peak on the narratives claiming that Russia is a victim. And yeah, with that really indicates or shows to you really the power of this approach, because mainly our work is really in looking at let's say the individual slices on a daily or weekly basis. But by doing so and by having this large data sets, we can also identify, I would say, historic trends and put it in perspective. And obviously here we rely on input from communication experts and experts really on Ukraine and Russia to put this all in the correct context. So we do collaborate also with academic partners who look into, let's say, the history of the individual narratives. But our really main job at the text and data mining unit is to retrieve the content and to make sense out of it. Making sense out of the data also leads me to my next topic. I have a few slides on network analysis. With network analysis, you can produce very pretty graphs as shown on the right, but our goal is really to get more insights, especially in let's say, the landscape of the actors, yeah, that spread disinformation, to also look into monetization. And here we have looked, and we want to dedicate more resources into looking into certain interactions. On this slide, I show you 3 interactions. So user, from social media, this can be followed by or following, for example. User source is quite interesting for us, because you can imagine that someone who tweets conspiracy theories about the flat Earth, the flat Earth theory, this person might also share content, for example, on chemtrails. And by looking into these user source interactions, we might be able to get a better mapping of sources that spread mis and disinformation. So it's basically, you could describe it as a crowdsourcing effort, really, to understand what the disinformation landscape looks like. Then we are also interested in source-source interaction. So basically, if you read an article in a quality newspaper, it can link to other newspapers, or it can link to content on social media, for example, on YouTube or TikTok or X. And we would like to really understand what these links are. So in the first approach, you just look at the frequency, but you can also look over time really to see whether there are changes in how a source is connecting to other sources. And this leads me back to the original graph that I showed. So we had to look at the Spanish source that linked to this purple cluster here shown on the left, in the first week of March. And by analyzing the second week of March, we saw actually that it kind of moved to this green cluster on the right, and there were different links that allocated it to that part of the graph, while the rest of that landscape remarkably stayed rather stable, I would say. So our efforts will be really dedicated to understand to a better understanding of the landscape and to see what the changes are over time. To give you an outlook, we are very much interested in deeper analysis of text content. We have run a natural language processing task really on persuasion techniques involving a large annotation effort. There are also publications coming out on persuasion techniques, such as whataboutism. Russia invaded Ukraine. What about Iraq? That would be a classical persuasion technique. Slogans or smear attacks, that we could identify. We are interested in looking into values and sentiment emotion analysis really on the large scale. So with our algorithms, we might be able then to detect trends and also do clustering that is kind of enriched by metadata on value, sentiment, and emotion. Concerning artificial intelligence, we are really in an arms race. So we already see that there's more AI-generated content, also image and video content, partly of very high quality. On the right side, I show two recent examples that were created by Elliot Higgins and Pablo Xavier via Midjourney. You might have seen already these two as they really were frequently shown already on social media. So there's really an arms race. We also profit from AI techniques. We have already experimented with using large language models for summarization and keyword detection, for example. So we can basically make the lives of the analysts going through text items easier. And for sure, we will have to dedicate more efforts also to look into image and video content, and we need automation really to make sense of the high volume of data that we are confronted with. Last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, we are also looking into what we call political intelligence. And with the upcoming European Parliament elections, we want to compare disinformation narratives during national elections to learn really how to deal with to set up the codebook of narratives that we are interested in, and build a codebook that really is as complete as possible for the European Parliament elections. Then it's quite important to point out actually that it's not like we have like one European Parliament elections. I mean, it is more like having 27 elections, and each member state will have different mis and disinformation circulating as well. So we want to understand what are the common narratives and what are the country-specific narratives. And for that, we have just finished the first annotation exercise on election-related narratives to be able to make sense of the large amount of data that we are facing. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Jens. I don't know if you see the question in Slido. If let me know. Do you want to have a look at them and address a couple of them?
Yes, there are many now. You see. So there's one question: what is the biggest area of disinformation outside of politics? That is something that I can comment on. I mean, we started really with COVID-19, and COVID-19 was so overwhelming that at the time, really, it almost felt like there's nothing else than COVID-19. Since then, we really looked into so many different areas, and I think it's safe to say that disinformation also follows, let's say, the general news media, those actors that spread disinformation on COVID-19 were very fast, really, to change to Ukraine, Russia, for example. And over the last few days, we have seen, for example, that there's a lot of disinformation appearing on the conflict in Israel, and there are fake videos, fake images spread. Some of them are computer generated. So what I just mentioned is that we are confronted with more image and video content. Partly it is video content that is made with the help of video games, and it is really quite far-reaching on social media.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I think it was important to look at both aspects from the fact checker point of view and from the researcher's point of view. What are, also the evidence that we are using to build our strategy to tackle disinformation. I will now share my slides, and I will tell you a little bit what the Commission is doing to address this phenomenon. I give you this number at the beginning of the session to show that it's not a niche problem. It's really a problem that everybody feels important to address. That's why we have started, as I said, some time ago with the communication in 2018, which also gave a definition of disinformation that, it's the target of the Commission strategy to tackle disinformation. And of course, it's not that every lie is disinformation. There needs to be behind the lie and the intent to disseminate disinformation, to achieve economic gain, intentionally deceive the public, and importantly, cause public harm. This is the disinformation that we want to tackle. So there is the need to have several ingredients to be the target of our policy. Otherwise, of course, as I was saying at the beginning, the risk is to limit freedom of expression, and this is something we don't want to happen. And also because the defense of fundamental rights is key for an institution like the Commission. There is no intention to create a Ministry of Truth where the government decide what is true and what is false. We look for a all-of-society approach involving several actors. You have heard the voice of the fact-checker or the researchers. Of course, there is the need to involve civil society organization, member states, and private sector, in particular online platform. And this is what we have done since the beginning, so to create a sort of multi-stakeholder dialogue and approach. There are the strategy to tackle disinformation accounts for several pillars and several instruments. I listed here 3 key three key instruments that we have. We have, and it was mentioned before by Carlos, there will be a session tomorrow also about the Digital Services Act. I think that will be also a very interesting session, which is regulation. But we have also other instruments. One of those is the Code of Practice as Disinformation, that so far is a self-regulatory regime that online platform and other actors have agreed upon to tackle the phenomenon of disinformation, and the European Digital Media Observatory, which is an observatory that is an independent observatory financed through European money that pull together a multidisciplinary community that works on the phenomenon to tackle the phenomenon of disinformation. And I will focus my presentation on the Code of Practice and on the observatory. So the code there was a first code that we had in 2018 that we kind of work with and follow basically the work of platforms that at that time agreed on the old code, and this code was kind of drafted in view of the European election to protect the European election of 2019. This was a reflex also that a lot of people had in order to avoid, situation like the one that happened during the US election in 2016, where I believe a lot of you have heard about the case of Cambridge Analytica, where political ads were used, or advertisement in general was used, to data from user was used to, target political messages to social media users. There was a revision, so this code was in place until 2021, but we felt that there was a need for a revision. There was a multi-stakeholder dialogue to prepare the revision. We have issued a guidance, the Commission has issued a guidance indicating which were the gaps that need to be addressed and the shortcomings that need to be addressed by a new code. And therefore, the old signatory and new organization got together and delivered a new code in 2022, which includes 44 signatories, and it's much more granular and acknowledge as well the different type of services covered by the code. Therefore, we have 44 commitments and 128 measures that describe in a quite detailed manner what the signatory will do to address the phenomenon of disinformation. The code, as I said, is a self-regulatory one, and it aims to become part of the co-regulatory regime that is foreseen by the DSA, and I'm sure that you will hear about this tomorrow. So, I mentioned the shortcoming and the gaps to get to the new code. We looked to, and we wanted the signatory to have a larger base, to have a set of diverse signatories, so not only online platform, but also other actors that have a key role in fighting disinformation. That's why we have a fact checker, civil society organization, research organization in the signatory of the current code. This creates a sort of, very diverse community that is behind the code, that works, I would say, on a daily basis to the implementation of the code, and I will give you a few details later about this. Of course, we want the implementation of the code to cover all member states and all languages. We need more transparency to understand what the platform do. This is important to see which type of resources, how serious are the signatory for the implementation of the code. But it's also important to protect the fundamental principle. We want to know what are the action in place to limit the impact of disinformation and to be able to assess if this is not going too far and limit freedom of expression. And we want to be able to monitoring this implementation, and we want also the code to be flexible and future-proof. So the new code, as I said, it's a quite thick book of commitments and measures that look in different directions. The problem of disinformation is quite a complex one. There is an aspect of demonetization. A lot of disinformation is spread to gain money through online advertisement, so attract people views on website in particular to gain money from online advertising. So it's important to have in place measures to address this side of the phenomenon. We want to have more transparency about political advertising. It's important to have effective labeling on, in general, on advertising, but in particular on political advertising. We want to have more, efforts regarding reducing manipulative behavior. We heard both from Carlos and from Jens that, a lot of actors uses, let's say, platforms, game platform, in order to amplify disinformation through using, for instance, fake accounts, bots, generative AI. So we want this aspect addressed by the code. We want to have a better coverage of fact-checking. Carlos mentioned it. So better integration and use of fact-check work on the platform. And also we want for financial contribution for fact-checker in order to make them able to do their job. Last but not least, access to data, to platform data, is very important for research. Jens mentioned that they are doing mainly their work on Twitter and Telegram, if I understood correctly. And I believe that a lot of the fact that they are looking to these platforms is because other platforms, it's difficult to work for researchers on those platforms, on other platforms as well. So it's important to have in place a proper access to data for research purposes. And the DSA is providing answer also to this issue. So, under a certain condition, platform will be obliged to open up their data sets. I mentioned that the code needs to fit for purpose and future-proof before. So there is a transparency center now in place where you can go and read the reports. You will have I hope I included the website in my presentation. You can look at the report of the platform regarding the implementation of the code. There are other interesting information like which type of commitment each signatory of the code has committed to. So it's quite an interesting reading. There is a permanent task force in place which basically follows the implementation of the code, ensure that the code is properly implemented. This means that there are regular meetings between the signatory of the codes to ensure a proper implementation of it. And this task force is chaired by the European Commission. And it's important we have strong reporting commitments within the code to ensure to have regular information about what the signatory are doing. In this respect, major online platforms are obliged to deliver their reports twice per year, while the other signatory will deliver the reports only once per year. We want to have granular data, a member state level, that can provide us information regarding the implementation of the code at member state level. And if you look to the report, you will see that there are qualitative and also quantitative information that are interesting about the implementation of the code. I will show you some in particular, some quantitative elements in a second. So again, here, this is an overview of the signatory of the code. It's a quite diverse set of stakeholders, including, of course, major online platforms. We have also a small platform, which are not considered very large online platform in the DSA sense. There is the advertising industry that's quite heavily involved, a lot of fact checkers, civil society organization, and also players that, provide a technological solution that can be very helpful to address the phenomenon of disinformation. Again, here, while in 2018 and until last year, we were in a full self-regulatory regime. Since last year, we have the Digital Services Act that poses obligation on very large online platform, very large search engine to address the risk posed by their services. And of course, disinformation is one of these risks because it can have an impact, for instance, on the electoral process, on public discourse. So it's important for those platforms to address this phenomenon, which is not necessarily linked to illegal content, but is linked to harmful content, and so needs to be dealt with particular care in order to strike the right balance between doing something to address this risk, but at the same time protecting freedom of expression. So back to the code, I mentioned the importance to have transparency, the importance of have reporting about how the platform are implementing the code. We have received, and these are public reports, in September, the new set of reports from the so-called very large online platform, and these are the services that are covered by these reports. Here you also find a link to the Transparency Center where this information are stored. And this is an unprecedented amount of information. It's in total, it's probably more than 900 pages and of text and data that describe what the platform are doing in quite some detail. Of course, we expect to have in the future even more information, so that the public is also able to have a better idea of what is going on. But I wanted to give you an example of what you can find in these reports. You can find, for instance, that Google has, in the first half of 2023, prevented more than 31 million of advertising from following to disinformation actors in the EU. Meta reports that it has labeled 680,000 political ads in the Union, and that they have also acted upon on political ads that were not in compliance. So a quite large number of those, they were not in compliance with their terms of service. Microsoft, for instance, reports about how many fake accounts were taken down on LinkedIn. Of course, fake accounts can play an important role in spreading this information. Similar numbers are also provided by TikTok, which also include information on how many followers had these fake accounts. Interesting information that links also a little bit to what Carlos has shown in one of his slides, is the effect of fact-checking. Carlos showed you what happened when a piece of content gets fact-checked on Facebook and Instagram. You will see a sort of a gloss image, which indicates that this information has been fact-checked. Apparently, by a fact checker, apparently this based on the reports of Meta, this reduces around 38% the propensity the user to follow up with the sharing of that piece of content. So I think this is valuable information, more on fact-checking, because we have heard from Carlos, there is both TikTok and Meta have quite a large set of collaboration with fact-checkers. Meta is also reporting other interesting number on the effect of warning labels on fact-check content. As Carlos said, because we are in this new digital environment, let's say, we have new players that play an important role. Fact checkers are one of those. They are important for the digital media ecosystem, and therefore there is a need for them to have a strong ethical and professional rules. And it's important that we have now this European fact-checking standard network, which is setting the highest standards for fact-checkers all around the world. Interesting. We have heard also the role that generative AI, so deepfakes, are having in spreading disinformation. For the first time in this report, you will find information about what the major online platforms, signatory of the code, are doing to limit the impact of this type of content when it's used for disinforming people on their platform. So this is also something relevant for today's discussion. And for the first time, together with the reports of the platform, we have received, and you will see that there is a report available in the Transparency Center. We have received the result of a pilot project that they ran in France, Poland, and Slovakia to measure the phenomenon of disinformation, in particular the prevalence and the sources of disinformation on several platforms. What it means when we say prevalence of disinformation on sources of disinformation. This pilot project has a look on how easy it is to find disinformation content, so how easy it is to discover disinformation content on platform, how much engagement there is on disinformation content, so it's about absolute post engagement, and how much engagement there is with disinformation content versus content that is not disinformation. So it's a very interesting reading. Similarly, this pilot project look at sources of disinformation, comparing, for instance, how many disinformation sources are present on platform compared to non-disinformation sources. I will not go much more in the details, but it's a very interesting report. The one, this one, which has been done by Trust Lab, which was hired by the signatory of the code to carry out this pilot project. I mentioned that I will talk about the two pillars of the strategy to tackle disinformation. I spoke about the code, that if you want is a sort of, involving the big players in the digital ecosystem. So I would call it more a top-down approach. But we are also, supporting very much bottom-up approach. That's why we support this independent observatory, the European Digital Media Observatory, that is pulling together a cross-border multidisciplinary community which involve independent fact-checkers, academic researchers, civil society organization, media organization. And this observatory is composed of 14 hubs that cover the entire European Union. You can look on the web for these hubs. They have pages in local languages, and you will find there what they are doing, and you will find information about the disinformation narratives that they detect, they analyze and expose. There is a repository of fact checks. There is media literacy related activity that they are carried out. And EDMO is also this network of organization is also conducting joint investigation to look to the phenomenon of disinformation, how it spreads across Europe, how similar narratives, for instance, are used in different member states to spread the same disinformation, but they are adapted to the local media ecosystem. There are very interesting reading. EDMO has also created a task force following the unfortunately invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and there is a lot of insightful reading, including a repository of all fact checks done related to the war in Ukraine. EDMO is also preparing for the European election. There is a task force in play. They will carry out a risk assessment ahead of 2024. They will monitor they do monitor on a regular basis what are the disinformation narratives ongoing in Europe, and they will do this also, you know, during the electoral period. It's very interesting to see, as also similar to what Jens showed, how the disinformation phenomenon is evolving, following also the daily news diet, but also, of course, political agendas of the different malicious actors that are involved in perpetrating these disinformation narratives. And then, of course, there will be, this task force will also be a place where there will be a sharing of best practices among different actors, and so that, you know, we will have more chances to impact, to have their work impacting the society. I will stop here. I will stop sharing and look to your question if you have any. But give me a second. Okay, let me check your question. I see a question which is, I think, very relevant. Will there be a regulation on disinformation similar to terrorists online? Do you think that the DSA is enough? I mean, we started with I would call it with self-regulation. No, we ask platforms to self-regulate themselves. This was not sufficient. That's why we have the DSA in place. I believe the DSA will bring the results. It's a co-regulatory approach. Allows there are obligations that the platform have to fulfill. They will have to prove that they are doing enough. So otherwise there will be fines, and we will look in a few years what is the impact of the DSA. Regulated disinformation would not be an easy task. We have to acknowledge that we are not talking about illegal content. Illegal content is defined as such by judges. So therefore, it has also, you know, a quite, let's say, cumbersome and long, requires quite a long time to be defined as such. This information can have an impact in a very short period of time. So we need an agile system to address the issue. So I think it's a promising avenue, and it's certainly the framework that we have in Europe is certainly the most advanced worldwide. I mean, and of course, there is I mentioned there is regulation, there is self-regulation, but it's also important to support other type of activities in our strategy. We include media literacy activities, which are carried out by EDMO, but are also we support also other projects that look at how make a citizen more resilient against disinformation. And in particular, it's important, you know, that citizens understand how these new tools works. It's this technological revolution has happened in a very short time, so it's difficult for everybody to keep up. with this. So it's important also that we have in place a proper, tools to inform the citizen on how this technology works. So as I said, the code, I see a question about the enforcement of the code. The code, for the time being, is a self-regulation. So there are no sanctions if someone does not implement properly the code. On the other hand, we follow closely the implementation of the code. And the aim is to have this code transform, to have a code that becomes a code of practice, a code of conduct under the DSA. And that of course, therefore it becomes part of the core regulatory mechanism. And in this case, of course, there will be a way to enforce the code. I see an interesting question. What would be the instruments, in your opinion, to empower a user to be part of the multi-stakeholder architecture and even become a regulatory actor themselves? Well, now the second part of the question, I don't know if user can become part of the regulatory mechanism, but certainly there is the need also to make user understanding how this platform works. What are the possible misuse of this platform by malicious actor? We are also looking here in the Commission to finance projects that develop tools that help media professional, but also citizen to understand if what they see online has been manipulated, for instance, if an image has been changed to deliver a different message or to support a disinformation campaign. We started this several years ago. And for instance, we have a tool that is used, we have financed the development of a tool that is called in-vid verification tool that is used by tens of thousands of journalists around the world to exactly assess the veracity of images and videos. And there are new projects ongoing that are also looking to how to detect content created by generative AI. So I think this is a real important area to support. What will happen with the EDMO task force after election? Well, we will see I believe EDMO, which is independent, will see what are the results of the task force. Certainly, it will be, the first time that EDMO will do this exercise. The task force will draw conclusion, as they have done also with the work they have done on the Ukraine wars. I believe they will deliver recommendation. And we look forward to look to their recommendation and to their insights, because, as I said at the beginning, the phenomenon of disinformation is complex, and we need to build an extensive knowledge on it, and considering also, keep taking into account that it's a phenomenon that is developing and transforming very quickly, following a little bit what are the technological trends that allows more and more sophisticated campaigns, disinformation campaigns, to be built. So we will look at this also in the future. I don't see, I believe I replied to most of the question. Well, there is a question about if something is still missing, what are the gaps? I believe that we should keep reinforcing the effort. We should keep supporting the effort of that are around in Europe that are looking at the phenomenon. It's important that we keep this multi-stakeholder approach, both in the code, in EDMO, because we need to look to the problem from different point of view. So I believe that on this there is never enough. But we are looking forward to ensure that more is done, because it's important to keep all these actors active in order to provide all the evidence that we need to build a proper policy. I would conclude here. I don't know if Carlos or Jens, you have anything to add or other question to answer? Yes, please.
I just went through the slide, and there are indeed 3 questions that were more directed to me. The first one was on the language coverage. What we are doing nowadays is really multilingual from the ground up. We used to rely more on keyword and pattern-based monitoring, but nowadays you can, with the latest models, you can train a model in 5 languages and it will work in 16 other languages immediately. So that's really quite powerful. The second question was about manual work. When we started with COVID-19, we only had basically the clustering, and with the help of manual annotation according to the narratives that we identified, we gradually moved to a full automation. So what we are doing now today for COVID-19 is fully automated. And that holds true for any new topic. You have to start somewhere. So clustering is always a good way to deal with any infodemic. And you can identify trends and then train your models accordingly. The last question I saw on Slido was about the psychology. And there are indeed many studies about misinformation. And I would like to point, for example, to the work of Professor Stefan Lewandowski from the University of Bristol. He published quite extensively about the correction of misinformation. So that is really a good starting point to look more into the psychology. And there's a whole field about understanding the psychology behind mis and disinformation. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we can conclude the session here. Thank you very much for your active participation. It was very interesting also to see the question that you had. It's always good, and they are probably also a good feedback to understand the value of our work. And again, I remind you of tomorrow's session in the morning about the Digital Services Act, and in the afternoon about the Digital Market Act. Thank you very much.